In a spiritual sense, all men lead lives of quiet desperation. In a human sense, and we all know this is true, we all lead lives of quiet desperation. But today we're going to talk about the factor of conditions been called illumination, enlightenment. It's a very high state, the beatific vision, the vision of God, which once you have, you never fall back into the everyday fold. Everyone here who is spiritual will know what I'm about to say. We've walked across the light of many, many stars to be here. And when we rediscover that, and we uncover all the madness of this world, then we step back out of the madness across the light of many stars. You are a star walker. This world is a hell, which is a hell of a way to begin a meditation, spiritual empowerment session, but all of us who are spiritual know that. All of us who are intelligent, who have developed ourselves over lifetimes, know that. There is a state of grace behind the whole world. My friend here has had the worst life I've ever dreamt, and at his worst moment, beyond anything I even want to describe, that was the moment where he could have blown his top but didn't, and the whole heavens opened up to him. Didn't improve his life, but he didn't act on it. And at a point, over many years, we learn not to act on it, on the everyday ordinariness, the mediocrity of the everyday, the boring nature, the insipidness of so many lives. We all understand what's being said. If we're spiritual, we're contrite, we're withdrawn, and we're whole, and we're decent, and we're kind, and we're true, and we're very, very, very powerful. Except we don't aim that power in the world to be successful. You could say we aim it inwardly, but inwardly to describe the interior life, that which is spiritual. You see, the wording gets a little subtly tricky because if you're spiritual, the world never was. How could this madness be? How could that, and at the same time, how could there be a God of any universe that would allow such foolishness, such stupidity, such vileness? It's a chamber of madness and boredom. All men lead lives of quiet desperation. If we understand this, then we can quiet ourselves, and if we can quiet ourselves, that we've been quiet at the beginning of time, before time was, before churches saw light, before names were named, before anything was, we are star walkers. We're kind, we're true, we're decent, we're incorruptible under the worst circumstances. And all this, like my young friend here, going through the worst tragedies you can ever dream. Certainly including myself every day of my life. If I were to be honest, as a spiritual presence, which is what I'm endeavoring to do right now, not because I haven't been aware of the divine effulgence, the glory, the beauty, the wonder of God, but because I am, and I'm in this world. And this world is a horror show. When you're spiritual, when you're aware of the starlight, the moonlight, the distant times, point being that the world is not what the world thinks it is. We think about that quiet little glow, that disk around the moon at night from the sun's light. It just still encompasses that sphere. You're something so delicate you could walk through it when there's light clouds, very light moving through it, and has that aura about it. And that we see through and around and aside from everything we see and feel and know. And so as a spiritual being, one of hundreds of millions of us in this world, more or less, who knows, who cares, it doesn't mean anything, because the world is the illusion. However, the world is the hard surface of the moon, which isn't there. Just that glow, that light, and we can look right through it. I certainly can all my life. I don't see this room, my dear friends, the buddies here, and my teacher. It doesn't matter, it's to me. And as a spiritual being, like my friend here, we have to abide by the laws of the world to a certain degree, and yet the laws are inadequate to sanity, to wholesomeness, to decency, to raising a family even. This is not a sane planet. This is not a planet. There is not a world. God never created a body, or a time, or a place, or even a beingness. It's just that subtle starlight off in the distance, light of an air, or time, or the elements, or the increments. And that's what we're made of, so we see right through everything. Look at that little auric light around the moon or any heavenly sphere. You can step into eternity. That's the sense you get. And that's the sense that all spiritual people live with every moment of their life. Some drill down and try to bring their emotional quality into the world from heaven. Some do it through work. I have a friend who's a great martial artist, and he admitted to me yesterday the only piece he ever knows, besides when he works with me, is when he's wrestling. He was a profoundly good wrestler. And that's the only time he's quiet, because that's something like if you have a friend who has ADHD, all these names for things these days, and it's all one thing. It's a lack of a mommy and daddy, and something to direct it. My buddy Master G here can communicate with anyone, special needs kids. He has students that are completely out of it, and he teaches them karate for years. Their parents will come in and they can't believe it, because he can communicate to anyone, because he's so quiet inside and so fearless and kind and true, and he's disciplined many hundreds of people. He's made many champions, as well as his own children. So certain people can do that. They're not reactive. I have a buddy that was hired by, I better not go into this. Anyway, it was something very mystical, but steps a hairline away. The point is, there are people who are very spiritual, and everything I say today, that all of us who are spiritual, we relate to. We feel it, we experience it. We know it's true. And when I talk about the indecency of the world, the incredulity about it all, like how could a God of any universe create this madness? It's not said that we overreacted, it's said that we quietly, yes, that's what the meditation is about. We're looking at it in the face all day, every day, without reacting to it. And it will dissipate, it will disappear. Second, you train your senses. When Greg teaches young people with problems, he teaches them to find that avenue. To be Helen Keller, you know, the blind woman who could just more wisdom than they could ever dream. I think lived a very powerful educational, instructional life for all of us. I think she said that the greatest things in life cannot be seen or heard, but must be felt with the heart. Now, you're in the transcendent condition, as my buddy here, who's had the worst life I've ever heard of, and still does to this moment, and yet his connection to God is perfect. How could that be? I'm admitting today that my life is a horror show every day because of my sensibilities, and I know that the world truly isn't here. And this is instructional for this empowerment session of meditation, that we can exist through it with our sensory equipment, our heart and our soul. Prayer, meditation, dedication. It isn't believing in God, it's knowing God. It's being as God is. You could say in this world, that would be the way it would be stated in the scripture, but the world isn't. It never was, it never could be. So we traverse this world system in our understanding and the faculties of perception that we all have, and we can step aside of it. Read some beautiful poetry at night. Emily Dickinson, I'm always amazed how in a few sentences, a little couplet, the world would just crash apart. Like they would say in those Zen koans, where the master asks you a question and you answer it. It's not about the words, it's about something happens inside they call satori, which the world blows up and disappears. In a spiritual sense, it's an unimaginable, ecstatic, and yet intelligent sense that comes about, oh, this isn't here. And that's all Zen Buddhism ever said. But they had to create all these art forms to say it. It wasn't good enough. The Bodhidharma, the great saint, originally discovered it, the original proponent of it. But in order to say that it exists, all these different art forms, including martial arts, were created around it and through it and about it. And that's existed around the world throughout all time. I mean, there's only ever been two types of people in the world. There isn't like the cave dweller and whoever, and the people going to Mars. There's only been two types of people: the material and the spiritual. I'm asking the spiritual to join hands with God this day, this hour, this moment, and to happily walk away from the world and know there's nothing wrong with you. That's the main thing. You are the auric light of God. You are a star walker. You're not a mortal. Let that go entirely. Spiritual consciousness of all experiences in this world is the one and only thing that can only be reached through by stepping right through the wall. The mathematics decry that if you take a half a step towards a goal, say there's a wall, you take a half a step towards it, you go half the distance, you'll never get there. Spirituality, you have to crash through the wall in the most delicate spiritual sense. And faith will take you there. And God will be there. And God will be you. You are a star walker. You're here for a very short time because there never was time. You'll overcome the world without hardly trying. It's just understanding these words, these principles of reality. You are not immortal. You are an immortal. You are a spiritual soul. You're infinite, endless, unbound. Anyone ever thinks that God created any of the stuff in this world is a liar. So step back from that. and stop blaming. There's only this godness, this goodness, this purity, this truth. And I say that vehemently because it's real, because it hurts everyone I love, the garble that exists in our world. All these spiritual disciplines work. Try a few that help you get through the day, just to retain this thought of the day, that you're a transcendent creature. You're a divine purpose. You're a remarkable soul. You are, as Gandhi would have said, you are a great soul. You are great souls. You are goodness. And you're uncircumscribed by this thing. You are the very light of the first dawn. These things can only be approached through poetry, through prayer, through love, through kindness. When you think of God, think first of your grandma or your mom, or the most gorgeous starlight evening you've ever known. That's the very, very first hint of God, not some tragedy in our life. We let go of all that, and we will transfuse, if that's a word, through the whole world, through all this material consciousness. Believing in any of it is cruelty. And you have to have very soft intent and interior, because I'm around people all day. I belong out in the mountains or the hills. When I left Nepal last time, whatever, it was in the mountains. It was a tragedy walking away from my monk friends and lamas, and like, I gotta walk back because I knew I could communicate whatever this was. It was with me forever, but I found like-minded folk up there in the mountain retreats. And it's a dream to be in the company of those who are truly spiritual and kind and powerful enough to not believe in the everyday. Yet they always give themselves to those in need. But beyond that, they're not here. The truth they carry with them through eternity is, this isn't here. I had a friend, a woman lawyer, who had that in a government installation, very powerful lawyer, and she would go in the back of her car with me, this is not here, but she meant it literally, and it would just be very funny. There are transcendent people in your life. Seek them out, or just sit quietly and look at the light around the moon in the early evening hours. And you'll see this. You'll know this. You are this. There's nothing wrong with you in the most subtle sense of apprehension about anything. That's all part of this worldly consciousness that Jesus Christ said, if you don't hate your life, for my name's sake, you're not worthy of me. That's the spiritual, you've got to take that spiritual sentiment into what's being said is that he's a representative of the light, and yeah. I deal with this world every day of my life, and I'm trashed all day, every day, and I've had two people that have helped me with my work in my life, and no one else understands that that they're just in the way, and they could do anything in any moment. And I don't care about that. I'm making a statement of, like, the book of Job I looked at the other day, and opened up to something very mystical and spiritual. And then I realized that all of us who are truly spiritual live that horrible life. It's the myth of Sisyphus, where you keep walking up the mountainside and you get a larger weight put on you to slide down. You get a larger rock to carry up. And people like my buddy Greg here can do that. My teacher Susan can do that. I don't know how they do. For me, I've been able to look right through it, so I always handle it. I'm not complaining about it. I'm saying that I didn't know till yesterday that that's how horrible it was, because I love God. I love you. That's why I'm here. And it's a love that says, there be pain no longer, fear, trepidation, hunger, starvation, any of it. And it all begins, like Jesus said, that if the light of the eye is dark, then the whole body is filled with darkness. Meaning, if you believe in this physical world at all, even this much, having a basis in reality, then your whole body be filled with darkness, and then you're worshiping the dark one. He said, however, if the light of the eye be single, then the whole body is filled with light. Meaning, if you don't believe in the world, if you're illumined, if you're spiritual, if you're kind, if you're true, if you're decent, your perception is starlight. And there's no weight to it, there's no density to starlight. You step through it, and I'll do it now. I can look through many, many dimensions. Just, I don't have to be here. I must be here, and I'll never let go until the last person embroiled with this, who doesn't want to be it, stands upright. I'm here for you. It's more than just willpower. It's spiritual awareness. It's not the strength of our emotion or our muscle. I began this with my buddy, who's among other things, a great wrestler, and he admitted the only time I'm at peace like I'm with you is when I'm wrestling, and he's a daunting figure to roll around with. So he does that for hours every day of his life. But that's his only peace. And I see him as a special needs type person, and so it's like Greg's teaching. He can communicate with anyone. I know I've been with people where I pick the kids up, a family member, and oh, don't pick him up, Uncle Robert. He's like, no, I'm like, I know the kid's heart, the kid relates to me, and I can talk to anybody. There's nothing you cannot do when you believe in God, when you know you're not less than God in God's eyes. And you arrive at that place through spiritual awareness. I'm not accepting the carnal knowledge of the world. It's you just grab everybody in the world with a heart, with your heart, knowing God is your heart. Your heart is God. You're not different than God. When I talk about starlight, I mean that delicate, delicate nature. That's what God is. It's so much beyond that. And when you're there, that's what the world is. Like my friend Susan, or Carlos, or Greg, or my master teacher, Professor Mink, my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu teacher. He's an illumined being. I don't know how he exists in this world. He can do all these things that I refuse to do, or that I step back from, so he can live on all these levels. It's quite enormous, quite an amazing example for all of his students and myself. And the point is, when you mastered yourself, it's through not reacting, not believing anything in the world, and you'll find God looking through your eyes, and you'll be able to grab a hold of anyone you love and discorrupt them, and charge them full with the charge of the soul. You're a good person, you're kind, you're true. You're relevant in this world, and the rest of the garbage is not. The socio-political stuff, forget it. It will never change. You're made of starlight. You can walk upon the light of stars. You're only here out of empathy or something in a universal star system that fell out of whack. You allowed yourself to be poured into this through that trajectory, that aperture called birth. But you, deep within yourself, you know that you're holy. Holy is your natural state. Fall back into it. Do it for those you love. And all these gifts they talk about, and powers in cities, they call them SIDDI, in India, they exist, but they're wondrous, and they're not gifts and powers that relate to the world to do this or that. It's you very quietly uninvolve your friends and loved ones with your heart from their being captured by the dark force of this world. You reveal the darkness by becoming the entirety of the light that you are, that you were, that you've always been. You are eternal starlight, not less. And that's the very beginning of it. Once we know that, then we can step through to this larger place called heaven, called God, called you. Isn't it you? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Skolta.